What is going on in the crypto market? Well, it would seem like next to nothing day to day. I mean, Bitcoin's down a little bit, but the bigger trend continues to set up for a bull run. Today, we'll dive into the macro picture with Paul, and then let's look at Bitcoin and ETH, and then some viewer picked alts, and we will take some viewer picks from the live stream to look at today. Welcome to the Crypto Rain channel. I'm your host, Jay Rain. If you like money and crypto, and you're looking for a seasoned investor take on the crypto market, join the Rainmaker family. Do note, I'm not a financial advisor. Paul's not a financial advisor. We're definitely not your financial advisors. I'm a crypto investor myself. Paul is an investor in many markets. We do want to thank our Patreon members. We have a private Discord that only our Patreon members get access to. But we do also have a free Telegram group that you can join below with a fantastic community. Now, make it rain on that like button. Strap in for the show. Let's get this party started. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Always lots going on. And I detect that there's some fears going on with the debt ceiling in America. Once again, we're back to this. They hit the debt ceiling, which is causing a bit of problems or some worries. There's also talk of a bit of a slowdown in China. I don't think any of those things are particularly big problems. What I've seen is interest rates have peaked, and we may get some bad news that confirms why interest rates have peaked. In other words, we might get something that comes out that seems like bad news. It could just be that inflation is going down fast. It could be that China is going to slow down, and there'll be some worries there. I'm going to show you a chart of the dollar against the renminbi, which is strengthening, and we'll talk about what the dollar's doing. But generally speaking, nothing has changed in the broad macro picture. I still think that there's going to be a big risk-on phase. It's just at the moment we're having to play this very patient game, which takes me back to where we were last year when we were talking about patiently waiting for this bull market to begin in crypto. And it did eventually. And we have to accept that it's not going to be a straight line move. There will be periods of consolidation. I saw somebody writing something along the lines of, isn't it great that Bitcoin is trading in such a flat range, because if it continues to lose volatility like this, it will be regarded as a mainstream tradable asset. And I thought that's really interesting. I mean, my argument about Bitcoin and the volatility there is, it's always been argued that it's not a replacement for currencies because it's too volatile. And I'd be interested in your view on that. But I think the point of that is currencies can be very stable, and then they can be extremely unstable. And there are times when currencies can just go into free fall and massive collapse and hyperinflation. So, to regard Bitcoin as a too volatile a product to actually be useful in the real world is an interesting take on it. I can understand with regard to transactions and the actual technicals of technicals of actually paying for stuff and the slowness of the system because of the way it's designed. That all makes sense as to why it won't replace or couldn't replace money per se in day-to-day transactions in its current state. But to actually argue about volatility, I think, is a completely separate issue.
You're right to call out the weakness of that argument, because it is a weak argument. It is an excuse for why it can't work. Now, why is it so volatile? Well, because it's still going through adoption cycles. And with adoption cycles, you get massive swings up where a bunch of people buy it because why? They're chasing green candles, which is a human behavior. And then it corrects down. But every time it gets more permanent adopters. So they said the internet couldn't. It was just a fad. And the reason is that everyone that has their bets placed in established things, they're scared of new things. Now, what's amazing is, like, what was it? 600 years ago, all of Europe was scared to sail too far to the west because your boat would fall off the flat earth or whatever. Sea monsters would devour your ship. And when they went there, they discovered a whole new world, and Spain discovered all this gold that they took, and they were extremely wealthy because of it. Well, they like the existing problems. They like the existing problems, the current established structures where they can print as much money as they want. And each round of politicians, like this fight over the debt ceiling, is good when there's divided government in the US because it puts a little bit of rein on the spending. What often happens is Republicans go, you know what, if you sign on to my pork spending bills, we'll agree to it. And Democrats are like, well, you have to agree to more of ours. And the Republicans finally say, okay, we'll agree to let you spend on 2/3 of what you want if you allow us 1/3 of what we want. And the people harmed is those that have any savings in the US dollar. Why? Because more money is being spent than is being taken in by the government. And they make it up by excess printing and borrowing. And so it dilutes the value of everybody's savings. Well, what if there was a system where they couldn't do that anymore? The governments didn't have control of the money anymore. And so they actually had to be fiscally responsible. Governments couldn't spend more than they take in because they can't print the money anymore. And so for forever, right? Well, not for forever. For a long time, governments used gold. For thousands of years, they used gold as an exchange of value because it was hard to get and people couldn't just make it up. And then came this idea of fiat currency. Well, we're going to print banknotes. And every fiat currency dies, and at best it lasts 200 years. And the US dollar is going on 200 years. And why doesn't it last? Well, because the incentives are misaligned. The incentives of the current politicians is to spend into the future because they won't be around to have to deal with the problems that creates. And a lot of the population doesn't realize that the inflation is devaluing all their savings so bad. And so it keeps happening. But if you create a system where money is money, it gives the individual amazing power towards their future. That those that are good with their own money can't be deprived of its value because of government overspending, as well as it can't just be taken away from you. Now, the government has lots of ideas about where they want this technology of crypto to go, and it's called central bank digital currencies, where they're like, wow, we don't even have to print it anymore. We can just put it in the accounts, and even more, they want to be able to take it. And you saw that kind of taking in Greece, where Greece all of a sudden decided anybody who had over $1,000 in their personal account, they just took out everything over $1,000 or whatever the number was in Greece. And with a central bank digital currency, it's real easy to do that. Or they can decide politically what you can spend on and what you can't. You know what? You can't buy gas stoves anymore because we don't like gas stoves. So why don't you like them? And they'll give you some weak argument. They always have an argument for why they don't like it, because they don't want to tell you the truth. And so governments can continue to lie to you. Governments can continue to gaslight you. And they have complete control over your money. You will not be able to do anything about it. And that's what they're going for. Well, the population sees this thing called Bitcoin. It's like, hey, the government can't control that at all. I like that. And so there's a fight right now. I remember when I first started in crypto, and the government pretty much ignored it, laughed at it, thought it was stupid. And now they're realizing, oh, crap, this technology could upend our current monetary system. And so now they're fighting it. And they're not fighting it with the true arguments. They're using the SEC and other regulators to fight it on any way that they can to destroy crypto and push it towards central bank digital currencies. Why? That is the fight going on. They can control central bank digital currencies, and Bitcoin could replace the dollar. So when you hear weak arguments, so when the government's trying to get you not to do something, they don't tell you the real arguments. For example, in Canada, there were little old ladies sending $25 to the truckers rally. And the government then froze all their accounts, right? Why? Because, anti-terrorist laws. Little old lady grandma funding a freedom protest isn't terrorism, but they sold the laws that allowed them to do that under the idea of terrorism because they couldn't sell it under the truth is like, hey, when something happens politically we want the ability to take away people's accounts and not let them do that. But they can sell it under that argument. And so you see weak arguments that don't fully make sense because they don't make sense because that's not the truth. They're not telling you the reason. They're telling you a reason. Governments have a history of doing that since the beginning of time. Like Ronald Reagan said, the most scary words in the English language are, we're the federal government and we're here to help. And it's like, look, the person coming to help you might even have good intentions. Just, it's a misalignment of incentives. They don't care about you nearly as much as you care about yourself. They don't care about you. For example, in New York, when they had this big thing happening with this big new virus that was killing tons of people, and the governor of New York mandates that all these people get sent back into nursing homes. So the existing non-sick people that are in the nursing homes just get inundated with people sick with nursing homes, and the death rate was through the roof. Oh, but the government cares about you. And it's like that governor was sold as like the next president. He's the most amazing thing. And yet, because he had control of things and it wasn't a free market, he mandated a situation which caused mass death, and he paid no political price for it whatsoever. And so I don't like a situation where the government has control of hardly anything other than national defense, building roads, a few things, because the more power you give them, the worse it gets for you. And they try to sell you, oh, we'll help your life be more convenient. And they're just not an efficient system for that. And so now's the fight over the money system. And so you see weak arguments like, oh my gosh, yeah, it's just too volatile. Like you said, currencies can be volatile. Now, currently, Bitcoin is more volatile than, say, the US dollar. But as it goes through more adoption cycles and more people use it, it'll become less volatile.
Yeah, I think at some point, as you say, the currency system has to change, and we could be staring down the end of the US dollar because the technology's there. Even if there weren't nefarious reasons for moving over to a central bank digital currency, there are still problems with, say, counterfeiting and the convenience of electronic money that they would try to bring in. So I see that the problems, and I've heard a lot of the arguments about what they may or may not be trying to do. I also think that people would push back against anything that was too draconian if they tried to do that. But like you say, there are always ways and means to get people to adopt certain technologies. And I remember watching a documentary that was talking about how credit cards were brought in. And remember, credit cards at one stage weren't the ubiquitous, and it was called the AmeriCard. So it was Bank of America, AmeriCard, they created. And people didn't want to use it because they were worried. So what they did was they put $200 on the credit card so that people would go out and spend the money. And that's what made them adopt it and got them used to doing it. And then the company turned into Visa. So there are
interesting.
Yeah, so there are ways and means that they can do it. Maybe a crisis, in the next crisis, it'll be sold then, and it'll either be a choice between your bank account and a digital currency, and people will say, I've got no choice really. Then you have no choice. It's either zero or you've got to adopt it, unless you are looking at your other outside, potential, currencies. So, and you're already in the Bitcoin space. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, nobody really knows how this is going to completely play out, but I don't think there's a bad future for it either way, because it is such new technology that does something that never did before. Even if you're looking at the blockchain from the point of view that a long time ago people used to write things on tablets, and actually being able to record information was a valuable tool. Having an immutable blockchain is an incredible technology where it cannot be changed or it cannot be corrupted. And I just think that there has to be some uses that come out of that. And it's just we're figuring it out. It's just too early. So
It is early in this technology shift, right? Because since the beginning of time, well, you had to, societies used to deem, and what's interesting is the history of money. Like on islands where they didn't have gold and other things, they would designate like this rock has value and I own 1/4 of it and you own 1/4, and you could sell 1/4 of the value of this big rock that like can't be moved and everyone can identify, oh, someone, and that was like how you carried your wealth. And so humans have always wanted to have a way to like measure or value wealth. And so they've always created different things. In Africa, they created glass because at the time, glass, little orbs of glass were expensive to make and took a long time. So that was the value. And then the Europeans, who had easier manufacturing, would just counterfeit them, and they'd bring them in and they'd exchange this glass that if you look really, really closely, you could tell the difference, but they would like dump that into the market and exchange it for huge amounts of things. Like Native Americans used beads, right? Because beads were made out of bone. And so the Europeans would ship in beads. And so the American Fur Trading Company, the way that started is this kid essentially would go trade, he'd buy a bunch of beads and he'd go trade that to the Native Americans for furs. And they were as happy as could be because they got a whole ton of beads. And that like said wealth in their culture. And for him, it cost him a couple dollars and he got like $300 worth of furs that he could then sell for them to take back to Europe. And so he created the American Fur Trading Company and became one of the wealthiest people in the U.S. And because people want some kind of value on money. Well, since more evolved times, then the government was given this amazing power of regulating the money. And why? Well, you can't really trust a private business with it. You can't really trust the government with it, but there's nobody you can trust more than your government with it. And so there wasn't a better option. It was, the government was your least worst option out there. But now there's a better option that you don't even have to trust your government. You don't have to trust anyone. The rules have defined, the code has defined the rules. And those rules are what give you safety and protection, even from your government, right? So if you think about the world today in finances, are you truly free with your money? If you got on an airplane and tried to fly across the continent with $100,000 or 100,000 quid or whatever, would you even be able to board the plane?
Yeah, would you be even able to get a hold of $100,000 if you needed to?
Yeah.
I mean, can you go to a bank and ask for that?
$1,000 in gold bars with you, would you be able to? So are you even truly free with the money that you do have? If you try to wire that from one continent to the other, how long does that take? Does it even get through? How many explanations do you have to make about it? So true freedom is you own your own money and you don't have to answer to people about it every time you want to do anything with it. And the reason they use is anti-money laundering. That's just an excuse. Yes, there's some validity to that, but just a little bit, right? So they use a reason to sell you, but not the reason. And when you hear a reason that doesn't quite add up, it's because it's just a reason. It's not the reason. They're trying to pass whatever they're trying to do. And so governments, trust them about as far as you can throw them. Some governments are better than others. It's a necessary evil to have a government. But if you can create a rule structure that can take care of something better, and that's what Bitcoin did. And now the existing power structures, they don't want to give up their power. They love their power. You ever wonder how U.S. politicians, I don't know what they pay in like the U.K., but U.S. and Canada, they, in my opinion, they don't pay them enough. Pay them more and you'll get less corruption. So say a U.S. House member makes $250,000 a year. Well, they live in D.C., which is now super full of lobbyists. And you can't live off of $250,000 a year, especially if you're traveling back to your district. So you either already have to be wealthy or you have to be corrupt. Why? Because if you're corrupt, you can peddle your influence, and you can take in donations through a spouse, or in some cases a son, or some other thing where you make it hard to trace you. And tons in Washington do this. And so you're like, wait, they've been a public servant for 30 years. How are they worth, like Elizabeth Warren's case, 7 years ago or something, she was worth like 11 million. Now she's worth like 80 million. Well, how did that happen? She's been like, wait, that doesn't add up. Well, it does add up, and we all know how that happened. We just don't know the specifics of how that happened. And so actually, if you pay your politician more, you'll get less of that. And that's the fight going on, because one of the influences they have over, tremendous power over, is money, and being able to print off more money than is really there. And they're not, like Elizabeth Warren wants nothing to do with Bitcoin. In fact, all your corrupt politicians will want nothing to do with Bitcoin. Now, whether they'll stand up and say that is a different story. It's just your ones that have good intentions and want a better system that's going to buy into it. And if it gets enough traction, and it is getting enough traction, even your corrupt politicians will be scared to speak against it, because then they'll get unseated. And that's the worst thing that could happen to them, because then they lose their power entirely.
Yeah.
So we see this fight going on, and the genie's out of the bottle, and you're seeing some take a strong stand, like Elizabeth Warren and some weirdo congressman, I can't remember, in the hearings with Gary Gensler, that was just totally like kissing Gary Gensler's butt. But very anti-crypto, and they're forming this anti-crypto army, and probably some of those will get voted out and lose their positions entirely, because I think 20% of America or more now holds crypto, and probably half those are from the same party. Probably half are Republicans, half are Democrats. And so, especially as it gains more traction, people won't be able to win in either party if they go anti-crypto. So you hear excuses, they make excuses. Bitcoin's bad for the environment. It's too volatile.
Yeah, we haven't heard that one for a while, have we? Bad for the environment. That seems to have calmed down a little bit.
Yeah, and that's just a reason they've created, right?
Yeah.
Not the reason. And so they didn't get as much traction with that as they wanted. And part of the reason is, all the predictions about how if we didn't do things in the next 10 years, starting with like 1990 and Al Gore, New York was supposed to be underwater by the year 2000, 3 feet underwater because of global warming. And so people have gotten kind of immune to their threats. These politicians and the whole climate, oh my gosh, the climate disaster, if we don't do something immediately now and put all this money into it, then we're all going to die. And people are seeing through that, because we all care about our environment. We don't want a toxic environment. We don't want our earth to die. And so the whole like Bitcoin destroys the climate caught hold with just a fraction of people. It didn't get enough traction that they've continued using it. That's my take on it.
Mm-hmm.
So want to thank everyone joining us on the live stream. Share with us, Paul, what's going on a macro sense. Let's look at first the DXY, and then what's going on with gold, silver, and some other things.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's have a look. So we were talking last week or a couple of weeks back about this big level 100.82 in the dollar index. So when the dollar goes down, this goes down. When the dollar goes up, this goes up. So this is like a dollar share price, if you want to think of it that way, if it helps. So we've got a really good opportunity to break lower. We've got a weaker than expected, only by a point, but it broke 5% CPI. And the market went down and then reversed. And I think I said last week, the fact that it didn't go through was a bit of a concern. And it was still waiting. It was still possible, but it just didn't break. And there's a few warning signs coming out that there was a bit of dollar strength in the in the offing. And so I'll come back to the dollar index in a second, but if we look at dollar yen as a proxy, that's already gone right back up to what was this right shoulder of a head and shoulders reversal. So that should not be there, and this is no longer a head and shoulders reversal. It actually looks like it's going to have a pop even higher than this. There's massive resistance there, but we're knocking on the door, so we've got to be open to that possible interpretation. Look at the dollar against the renminbi. So this is starting to accelerate higher. So there was talk of weaker Chinese numbers, and I only look at it peripherally. I only hear this because I don't look into the fundamentals too much. And I'm just looking at it from the point of view of what the charts are doing. So it does suggest there is a bit of weakness, but I think weakness in the currency should do the economy well, because it will encourage more buying or help the exports of China, which they need. And same with Japan. So if we look at the dollar against the Japanese yen, and then we compare that to what's going on in the Japanese stock market, the Japanese stock market has been accelerating. Well, it's up another 600 points. Look at this. It's been bursting higher. So I've been expecting this breakout, and actually, it's right on its prior high, if not, so it's getting very close to its prior high here. So a weaker currency is telling us that the market is rewarding what is thought to be lower interest rates. So let me put it this way: when your currency weakens, that's the equivalent of an interest rate cut. So the market sometimes doesn't like that. So if your currency is weakening too fast, then people think, why should I hold assets in that currency? And they start to sell and pull those assets out. But if they think it will support the economy, then they'll buy the stock market. So we're seeing that relationship, weaker currency, stronger stock market, occur certainly in Japan. We'll probably see it occur in the Chinese and the Hong Kong stock market as well. But as far as the dollar goes, that's why we're in this holding pattern in the Dow, because the dollar has been strengthening a little bit recently, and it's still holding us in this range. Now, funnily enough, the Nasdaq has actually been pushing higher, which is quite unusual. Well, it's not necessarily unusual. It's unusual for this point in the cycle that it would be going this way, because tech has had such a good run. It led the way down after COVID and after lockdown. So when everything opened up, obviously there was a premium in those stocks that have fallen, and it's rallying again. But I actually think the fact that the Nasdaq's rallying is a really good sign for crypto, and I do tie in the fact that certain stocks, especially Meta, are very much linked to the potential of blockchain technologies. And we talked about Meta all the way down here, 242, and still going higher. And a lot of the stocks that relate to the chip makers, look at this. It's almost back up at the high. So the chip makers and the tech stocks seem to be doing very well. And so I think underlying, there is a lot of positivity in the market. It's just waiting to come out. There just is potentially some bad news. And just as an aside, while we were talking about cryptocurrencies in general, at one stage there was going to be Libra, wasn't there, from Facebook, which is obviously now Meta. And I thought that was an interesting move that they kind of floated that out there, and then all of a sudden it got shut down. So I wonder whether they got told, if they want to continue to play in the way that they are, that they shouldn't issue their own cryptocurrency, because there's an argument for that being very popular, because obviously the thing with cryptocurrencies is you want it to be issued by people who you trust. And I'm not saying you necessarily trust or don't trust big tech, but it's certainly a big enough name to create something that would certainly be bought by a community.
What was funny was the global reaction to Facebook trying to create their digital currency, right? And globally, all the politicians were like, oh no.
Yeah.
And slapped that right down. And the truth is, I don't want to trust Facebook's doing. I don't trust them at all. In fact, as we learn what they've done with our data and other things, like they aren't trustworthy. And in as much as I don't like the government having control of things, because, trust the government is little, I mean, trust but verify, but like the trust level isn't super high, especially the last 2 decades. I trust Facebook less. So
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there.
So I
It's
like the
but
current situation with USDC and USDT, in that there's competition for stable coins. I like that a lot. Although the government's trying to pick winners, right? So they're trying to shut down Binance's ability to have a stable coin and the moves that Binance was making. Now, actually, I trust CZ far more than I trust, Facebook and even the government. But I wouldn't want even CZ, because even if he's the best, most noble person in the world, and maybe he is, maybe he isn't, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I think the government, if they were completely honest with themselves and completely uncorrupt, they would realize the stablecoin thing is the best thing for them to keep the dollar going, and that they would really embrace stablecoins, and they would embrace competition among the stablecoins, but have some requirements that it has to be backed 100%, right? Because as a stablecoin issuer, you can make a lot of money, because what you do is you take in funds, like say people pay you in Bitcoin, you take in funds for your stablecoin, and you give them a stablecoin that you printed off in return, and then you take those funds and you buy interest-bearing safe assets. So that maybe you then you take in 100 billion and you print off 100 billion of your stablecoin, and you put it in something like real assets that are very stable and as safe as they can be, and you're making 3%. Well, you're making 3 billion a year, and so it can pay all the overhead of the company plus some profit. And so the stablecoin idea is a great idea, and if done that way, and they gave it like a structure of what they had to have, and it was just verified, that is actually a much more stable, safe way of doing things than even what banks have, because banks have margin lending, right? So they lend out way more than they take in. And so I like that. What the reason why I think the huge clampdown on crypto is twofold. Number one, Bitcoin is so big, you find very little politicians, even the regulators, speaking against it, though they would love to shut it down. They're going after everything else, because with Bitcoin, there's nobody they can go after that's identifiable. And so and the reason is there's power in saying no. There's no power in clarity, where these are the rules, and as long as you comply, we totally leave you alone. There's no power in that. The power comes in the fuzziness, in the, hey, you got to come to us and we can evaluate whether it's it's a default no to everyone. If you come to us and say yes. Interestingly, Sam Bankman-Fried met with Gary Gensler, chairman of the SEC, who he didn't take meetings from any other crypto people. And he meets with this guy supposedly like 13 times. I think it's documented on the record at least twice, but through other means, like it said, it's like 13 different times. And this guy was giving heavily to the party that Gary Gensler supports. Massive, in the billions of funds. So that's the power in this fuzziness and haziness of, you have to come to us to get your automatic default no into a yes. And that's why there's no clarity of rules. That is the situation they want. Come to us and we'll tell you if it's a yes. Oh, you're not donating to the right place? Well, you might consider that. Come back to us in 2 months. Well, what do you mean? And it's kind of like how the mafia deals with you, really would like you to pay for protection, but you don't have to. What protection guarantees that, like, we take care of things? So, like, it'd be a real shame if your business happened to catch on fire. And all we're asking for is 10% of what you make. like, are you threatening us that you're going to start a fire on our building? No, we didn't say that. It'd just be a real shame if that happened. No, I'm not going to pay for your protection. And, 4 nights later, your building happens to catch on fire. So it's kind of like you're paying for political protection. And that's why certain people love this fuzzy rules thing, and they don't want to clarify it. They don't want it easy to clarify. They want the default answer to be no, and you have to come to them to say yes, because that's where all the money is in politics and politicians. And that's where they go from making a $250,000 a year salary to, how are you worth $70 billion? Because they changed a lot of no's to yeses. And they kind of hide the details on how things all happen with that and how they got money. And people think that this is a new problem. It goes through waves of corruption. And like the U.S.'s corruption, to some extent, it's just more out there than other countries. But this happens in every country around the world. And it's out there in the U.S. way less than it should, because the press has been working with the corrupt for 3 decades, trying to hide it. And then there's always this, the freedom of the press allows like these new entrants into the press to come in that aren't part of the existing corrupt infrastructure that kind of highlight this stuff. And then existing press and those corrupt politicians try to shut down the new press. YouTube, I said some things that YouTube didn't like on my channel a year and a half ago or so, and I went from growing at 4,500 subscribers a month to 0 almost immediately. So, I made some people mad because I had some thoughts on governments requiring everyone to take a certain thing, even if you've already had it. Because I was a nurse in the military, and the best immunity you can have is having caught something. So when a government's making you take something, even though you've already had that illness, that story doesn't add up. That's political. That's not for your safety. It's not for your health. It's not for anything else. There's some other reason behind it. And talking about that got me, I don't know, like permanently shadow banned. Literally, the channel hasn't grown in a year and a half since then. And it was still in the middle of the bull market when that happened. I was like, so I did start. This is streaming to Rumble now. Started streaming to Rumble and actually Twitter as well. So that's a little bit frustrating. I'm a little bit frustrated on that. I actually documented the proof that my channel shadow banned because we have all these subscribers, and our view from last week's episode got like 200 views in the first 2 hours. And on Rumble, where I have almost no existing audience, it got over 100 views in that same time frame with almost no existing audience, which just means no shadow ban, right? No hiding it. And some of my subscribers were telling me, oh yeah, like I don't ever get notification on your videos. I literally have to search your channel name to find it. Thought that makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, those that found it is great. Because they get some of the best content. You come and join, and we look at things at a deeper level on the price analysis side. You really add some really good insights to those of us that are in the crypto space full time. And sometimes we're so close into the trees, it's hard to see the forest. Whereas because you're looking at very many markets and you don't get very much into all the specifics of crypto, you stepping back and taking a look at what's happening with the forest is extremely helpful.
Yeah, because all asset classes are in some ways competing against each other, and just to see whether there's more money coming in or whether investors are going to be more bullish or likely to take a risk or vice versa. And everything, as we've said before many times, goes through waves and cycles. It's just a question of where we are in the cycle. But it's always fascinating, and it's like a never-ending football game, is the way I see it. There's never time on it. It's always continuing. So there's always new pieces of information, although the structural rules just don't change. They remain the same. It's just, I suppose the players and the environment changes. But one market is very much like another market, and I think with Bitcoin, it's just been or cryptocurrencies in general, you've just seen these cycles play out so quickly major bull, major bear markets playing out so fast that you don't normally get that. It takes a long time to see these booms and busts and booms and busts in, say, the equity market. But sometimes you don't see that for decades. And then, but in Bitcoin, it's happened so many times in a percentage term that it's very unusual. But it's still following the path of what a market does, which is it becomes overbought, everyone piles in, and then it collapses, and then everyone gets out, and then it goes back up again. And it's so it is fascinating. But the underlying structure of the market as we have it at the moment is still the equity markets are in a bull market, and I think that drives a lot of the money and the interest in everything else. So when people are generally making money, their pensions are doing well, companies are doing well, they're willing to spend, they're willing to take risk, they'll be looking to diversify, I should say, and they'll sprinkle some money into things that they might not understand but just want to get a foothold in. And not understanding, as we were saying before, the internet was something that happened for a very long time until companies just decided they needed a presence, and then again they threw a load of money at it at a very early stage, didn't really understand it, and then came away from it saying, oh, we don't understand this business. But I'm talking about the 90s, and then you look at how much things have developed since then, and it's just incredible. So things really do go through cycles, and I think also it's important to know that we may not even be able to see what will be the big technology that comes out of it, because communication obviously is a very important thing, and one could have predicted that from the internet. What we're doing right now at the beginning of the internet was unheard of. You could just about get a GIF or a GIF, whatever you want to call it, on your screen. That was fancy graphics in the early days. It was just words. So the fact that you'd be talking through the internet and bypassing the telephone systems was unheard of. So the things that are going to be created, may not have been invented or envisaged at this point. So it's really exciting. I think it's a really exciting time in terms of technology and what's coming next.
Yeah, when this technology came about, there were some cool things about it. With Bitcoin, it really introduces something more secure than really ever seen before. And with the rules in place, maybe it would be a replacement to money, maybe it would be a replacement to gold, maybe it'd be a replacement for both as a store of value and a monetary, is something with monetary value. And it's still not clear where that's going to go, though it could, especially if the US dollar, which has been the strongest fiat currency, politicians continue to make such disastrous choices, then Bitcoin will replace it. Not because it came in and trounced the dollar, it's because the dollar killed itself is why. Secondly, it created this new way of creating permanent immutable ledgers with some kind of security behind it. And that security isn't always infallible. They're still hardening it so that things are more secure. But the problem with it was slow compared to centralized databases. So centralized databases, say Visa, can do 50,000 transactions per second with their centralized databases, which allows them to have Visa cards throughout the world that people can swipe, and it gets processed in a matter of seconds from when they swipe it, which has introduced huge amounts of convenience. Visa has made a fortune with it. American Express and all the car companies have made a fortune, and people like the convenience of being able to go wherever and just take a card with them, and they can visit and travel other places without having to carry cash or other things on them. But blockchain couldn't do anywhere near 50,000 transactions per second at first. And so that's still being solved, of how do you make something like blockchain be able to compete with what current centralized systems can do. And we're getting there. Cardano's implementing their Hydra solution, which as they bring on more nodes could go to 1 million transactions per second. Project called Devio, which is a permissioned blockchain and not a permissionless blockchain. But there are lots of places that want a permission blockchain rather than a permissionless blockchain. Well, their solution allows them to do 8 million transactions per second in their benchmark test, which is faster than what Visa and other things can do. And so now speed has been solved. And so you have the security that blockchain provides and the speed getting solved. And so what it'll do is it will allow a new wave of things the internet can now do that it couldn't do before. And other things it will be able to do better than it could before. And so that's why they call it Web 3 or Internet 3.0, because it's vastly going to upgrade the capabilities of the internet, which is why this technology progression is almost unstoppable. In order to stop it, they would have to get all the countries of the world to collude together not to allow any more technology innovation this way. And then there's the incentive of 1 or 2 or 5 of them say, no, we're not going to participate. We want all the entrepreneurs to come over here. Those countries would become super wealthy and everyone else would be left in the dust having to buy at high prices the technology that those other countries innovated with. So the US's regulators are trying to hold this back, like they're standing in a river with their hand like this saying stop, and they're doing that because they just want to control it so that they can find a way to personally benefit tremendously. And they won't tell you that. They say we're trying to protect people, but then their arguments don't fully add up. And when their arguments don't fully add up, it's because it's not their true argument. They're just not telling you the true argument. And so they're not going to be able to do it because other countries like the UK will say, hey, we're open for business. We missed it with certain things. We're not going to miss it on this. Like there's a reason actually that the UK has so much of the options desk trading, right? Because they embrace that technology. I think the US was slow to embrace it, right? And so a lot of the trading then went to the UK. Am I right on that? You would probably know that history better than me.
Well, a lot of the currency trading is because of where we are in the time zone, because we straddle the Far East, and then so when they're closing, we're open, and then we straddle New York. So it's our time zone that's helped, and it was also financial innovation. But you could argue that the US have more of that now. But I think it's really just because of the history of where we are, and going back a long way, it was a kind of Lombard Street was founded by the banks coming from Italy, Lombard, and putting the name banco is they would actually put benches on Lombard Street, and that's how the banks did their dealings. So there's a lot of history going back to banking, coming back to the UK. So a lot of it obviously developed from there prior to the American powerhouse taking off, and also when it was the UK that was ruling the world, which has gone into decline, and America took over. So there's the history of that as to why we have a strong banking system and a financial system, but some of it is because of the time zone and how we straddle both of them. But it was also an early adoption and understanding that it was a very important part of trade.
Yeah, and one of the things that saved the U.S. was they used to have less federal regulations, and so the states were left to decide for themselves when it came to automobiles, right? So the U.S. made a fortune through automobiles that then they exported throughout the world. But the big cities, New York, they were against automobiles. This new technology kills people. And so the reason people use this term red flag all the time is New York passed what they called red flag laws, where it was just a known fact that horses and buggies were safer than these new horseless carriages. And so if you wanted to bring a horseless carriage into the city for safety, you had to pay somebody to walk in front of your vehicle and wave red flags. So your vehicle wouldn't run over anybody. Now, did horses run over people? All the time.
Yeah.
Did that matter? No, because they were giving an argument, not the argument. The argument was is that the horse industry and the buggy industry and the horsewhip industry had their politicians in their pocket, and the politicians were standing in the way of the river trying to hold it up. And so what happened? Well, New York didn't get the major car manufacturers. They went to places like Detroit. And they built out Detroit. But then you have them, as they got really big and powerful, they got the politicians in their pocket. And so then new innovations had to happen elsewhere. Where did Tesla go? Did Tesla go build out of the places where all the technology was, like where all the major manufacturers were? No. A new car company trying to come into Michigan and build there, that wasn't going to happen. The politicians weren't going to allow it. So they went to California and they hired a bunch of tech people because they did want to innovate over it. And so this cycle happens. And the more that the U.S. has federalized and given power to the federal government to not allow states to have their individual technology adoption, well, then what happens is the existing power structures give all their money to these regulators in Washington who stop any new technologies from progressing. And so then people have to just go outside the United States. And this is how countries go into decline. And this cycle's happened all over again. And will the U.S. go into decline? Well, if they keep acting the way that they're acting. And Gary Gensler gets up and says, oh, it's for the people and we're trying to protect the people. But their actions don't make sense because they tried to stop the Celsius deal, which vastly hurt the people. And yet they were trying to sink it because of their reasons, not for the people. And so when their actions don't add up, they add up. People's actions always add up. They just don't always add up to what their stated intention is, but they always add up with what their true intention is. So when you're seeing their actions not match their stated intentions because their stated intentions are a lie. And I just see that over and over again. And I'm like, okay, well. And so just watch their actions. Their actions will tell you what their true intentions are. I've learned that in business. Just watch what people do. I've learned it in relationships, other things. So you're looking, and I look for business relationships where I see that people's actions always match their stated intentions because I don't have time to deal with the other people. Trying to figure out all the time what their real intentions are and stuff. That's not a world I even care to live in. So I just deal with people where their actions match their stated intentions. Been a lot of talk about other things. And the reason I follow politics is because politics is in the way of crypto right now and how this battle works out. So some people are like, oh, why do you pay attention to politics? It's like, well, it was way less important in 2017 because all the politicians and stuff were pretty much ignoring crypto. I mean, Donald Trump was president in 2018 and he wasn't a big advocate of Bitcoin at the time. Maybe he's changed his view on that, but at the time he wasn't because it was a threat to the dollar system. And most existing politicians are not going to embrace something that skews their power away from being able to influence with the dollar. And so even Donald Trump, who tends to be more libertarian, and libertarians love crypto, Donald Trump was like, nah, it's stupid, or he called it crap or something. And because it messes with the power of the US dollar, and no country's politicians want to devalue their ability to control their own fiat currency because it diminishes their power. And every politician thinks that they're doing things that are in the best interest of the country. Even I think Mussolini probably believed that. I think Stalin probably believed that. So, and some good people, like, one of the most historic prime ministers of all time, what was his name after Neville Chamberlain?
You mean Winston Churchill?
Yeah, Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't have wanted something that devalued the value of the pound at the time, right? Or was that the currency in the UK at the time?
Yeah. The pound's been the currency.
And what I love about Winston Churchill is he often did what was in the best interest of the country over putting himself first over time, and made him a great leader. So it's not abnormal for the politicians, even the non-corrupt ones, to be skeptical and try to obstruct something that could influence their power. Now, you are finding, like I watched this interview with a House representative from the Democrat Party out of New York that understood, he's very pro-crypto, and he understands how this benefits his people. In the current system, his voters, and the current system disenfranchises them and takes away their ability to make savings. And I was like, I like this guy. I like this guy a lot because he gets it. And even though it diminishes the power of the body that he's now part of, he realizes that that's better for his citizens and his voters, and he's not yet bought off. And I like this guy.
Cool.
All right, let's jump into Bitcoin and ETH, and then let's jump over to some altcoins.
Sure. Okay. So I think last week we were discussing. Yeah, sorry, I just saw that flash across about what we're expecting the debt ceiling up. They always just raise it, so I don't even know why it's a discussion really.
Yeah,
so it'll be solved.
It'll eventually get solved. I think it'll go past the date that Janet Yellen says, and Janet Yellen's just a negotiating piece for the White House. Oh my gosh, the whole world's going to fall if the Republicans don't do what the Democrat president wants them to do by this date. And they'll probably go past that date, and they'll work out some compromise that both parties are unhappy with. And that's usually what compromise really is. Something that neither side is really happy with.
Yeah, so in the short term, it will be used as an excuse for why the dollar's strengthening. But I don't buy that, but the tail seems to fit on the donkey for that particular reason, as it were. I mean, we were looking last week at a correction in Bitcoin and possibly this move up in the US dollar because we talked about the fragmentation. So there was some warning signs that we were going to get a bit of a pullback. The level that we were looking at is this 25,212, which was this key breakout point, and it's got close to it, but not quite hit it. But it's still in a corrective phase. So I think we could still see a little bit more of a move down towards there before it starts to go back up. If it starts to rally a bit early, I'm a bull. I'm bullish longer term, so that would fit in with my overall strategy. But it does look like we're in this corrective phase, and it's because, as I said before, the dollar generally looks like it's strengthening against some major currencies that are sometimes a bit of a leading indicator to go higher. So I'm broadly bullish. I'm kind of waiting for some bad news to come in to shake people out, and then look for the next move higher, which I think will be coming, within the next month or so, couple of weeks. We'll have to see on the timing. But I'd like to see the dollar turn down and break that 100 level in the dollar index, that 100.80. That's such a key support. When that goes, it'll be a really big signal. So also with where are we? My screen has just got suddenly just jumped and zoomed, which you can't see. So I'm going to try and sort that out. So yeah, I can't sort it out. It's not moving, but that's okay. Similar situation with ETH, and actually interesting again. I don't think we talked about ETH last week, but I did want to re-mention this support level at 1718, which was where the major support level for any retracement was going to come into. And again, that got closer than the Bitcoin one. But I was looking at the chart of Bitcoin versus ETH, and it gave me the view that we could be ready for a move of outperformance in ETH and underperformance in Bitcoin. So we'll have to see how that plays out. At the moment, there's not a lot going on there, but broadly speaking, the big trend is bullish on ETH, or more bullish on ETH, bullish on both, but more bullish on ETH than on Bitcoin. Now, I'm actually
what chart is that?
That was just ETH against Bitcoin.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to just jump over to a different chart because that one zoomed in and it just,
there we go.
Yeah, so my browser zoomed in, and then I don't know how it happened. I was just tapping tapping it, and it just zoomed in. I couldn't zoom out again. So yeah, let's just go back to those charts again. So yeah, we can see all of them now. That's much better. I thought it was displaying for you the whole thing, and it just wasn't doing it for me. But it looks like it was actually mirroring what I was seeing. So yeah, the 1718 to recap. It's a massive level. Should really hold, but we've got this trend line coming in. We've got the 200-day moving average. Lots of support if it does break. You know, that's not a deal breaker for me in terms of the trend. It's just, it's in a corrective phase. Same deal with Bitcoin. Maybe we could get it down to this 25,212 level. Massive support. 200-day moving average is still rising. The broader trend is still rising. So I'm looking for bad news to buy into. And on the ETH Bitcoin chart, let's just rescale that. Let's put it back into auto. So you can see this is just a range. It's just been bumping along in this range, right in the middle of it. Nothing really to see here as yet. But it's gone on for such a long time that at some point this is going to start trending again. The bigger picture is bullish. So I was just wondering whether we're getting closer to a breakout and outperformance from ETH, because it really has stalled a little bit. It was outperforming and it's just stopped. Now, you mentioned gold and silver, and actually it's really important that we talk about those, because gold was doing really well, got right up to its, or close to its prior high, and anything that goes 1, 2, 3, you look for a breakout. But because there are signals elsewhere to show that actually the market isn't quite ready to go, with the dollar bouncing, and also with silver way off its all-time high, actually way off its high for 2021, let alone its all-time high. Its all-time high is at $50. So that is seriously underperforming. I have to give you a bigger chart here. So look how much lower gold is, or how much higher gold is in relation to where silver is. Silver has underperformed, but I think silver will outperform. It will play catch up. It's just it's not doing it yet. So a bit of a correction there. Again, I don't think this is a change of trend. I just think the market's just getting really excited, perhaps just at the wrong time, and we'll see a bit of a correction back down. But overall, I'm bullish on gold, bullish on silver. I think they'll work their way up, work their way higher. This is platinum futures. Again, it's not quite as bullish as the gold chart. There's quite a lot of it's way off its high. So let me just rescale this for you. So you see where platinum is. It just does not look as bullish. And for a broad bull market, I want to see all of these synchronizing higher. So it's got a bit more work to do. It looks a little flatter. Palladium sometimes in the mix. It can give a signal as well. I'd like to see all of these, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, pushing higher. And as you can see, palladium is actually in pretty much a downward trend. It's made a head and shoulders top. I've got the neckline in there where it triggered. And so that isn't giving a particularly bullish signal to everything. But because overall, I think this year the dollar's going to continue to weaken, and into next year, at some point this will turn around. It's just not quite ready to burn hot on the upside. So majors are still looking good. Base metals, they have been under a bit of pressure, which is also an interesting sign when it comes to looking at inflation. So inflationary pressures more to the downside. We've got zinc. Look how much zinc's dropped. Aluminium, that's holding nicely. You've got lead, which is in a range, and high grade copper, copper's the most important one, I think, because that's the one that normally tells us whether we're going to go into a recession or not. That's holding in okay. It's on that trend line. But there's, again, a bit of fragmentation in these base metals. And when the dollar goes down proper, they should all be going up and synchronizing higher, which I think will come this year at some point.
Right, because the DXY is showing that, yeah, it's the dollar's gone up in strength and broken the pattern that it was in.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, we said we'd come back to the dollar, didn't we? So if we look at those other, I mean, you wouldn't normally look at the chart of the renminbi, the Chinese currency, and say that that's a leading indicator, but it was one that was burning up quickly, as well as the yen, that made me a little bit suspicious about whether this was going to break or not.
Hmm.
And it wouldn't take much for it to go all the way back up to this 105, 106 level. So, maybe that's what's on the cards. And if it is, that will put pressure on gold. It will put pressure on silver. It's already started to, and it's not really moved a lot. So I think Bitcoin and ETH can trade outside of that. I don't think it's a one-to-one relationship. Usually they will trade based upon where interest rates are going. And I'm pretty convinced that we've seen the top, as I say, in interest rates in the US. So the curves look for weakening going into stabilization around June, and then as we get into September, the prospects of a rate cut go up a lot. So I think when the market starts to get wind of that, we should see risk on trades really coming in and the dollar weakening again.
Yeah, that'll be nice when rates start coming down.
Yeah.
And the Fed's usually behind the curve with massively delayed reactions. So they'll probably wait too long to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's we were saying on the show. Why did they raise interest rates when, even if they think that there isn't really a contagion problem around banking, there are still problems, and doing nothing at that stage would have been a really good idea. So typically they move higher because they want to show that they've got inflation under control, and so they kind of, the momentum of what they were saying before, they had to carry that through into that interest rate hike.
Even though they shouldn't have been raising rates at that point.
Well, I mean, look, who am I? I don't know. They're supposed to be really clever people. So all I can say is it just looks like the market thinks that they'll be cutting rates. And this is the most sensitive of all assets is equities. It's why it's always a good idea to keep an eye on the equity markets, see where the risk is coming in. And the equity charts don't look bad. And I think position wise, people are generally short. So they're expecting the market to fall. And there's nothing technically at the moment to suggest that's the case. So it's really, what's interesting about it is you've got this mindset that the market thinks that equities are overvalued. There are probably some really fundamentally negative aspects of the economy and situations that are going on with the banks that are affecting people's views. But overall, the market seems to be doing okay. So it looks like these are things that are going to be shrugged off, especially, obviously, if rates go down.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at some of these altcoin picks from last week's suggestions. We had 4 of them, and we'll go through them pretty quick so that we can look at a few of suggestions. Chris was asking if we could look at XRP. Absolutely. I'd love to look at XRP. Let's take a look at Render, XHV, Flow, and LUKSO. And then we'll jump over to XRP.
Sure. So which one did you want first? Haven, is that the first on the list?
Render.
Oh, Render, yeah. Okay, so yeah, Render. Bullish on Render, still bullish on Render. We had this breakout of this major base. We had this potential consolidation, pullback. 200-day moving average is moving up. It didn't align it completely to this trend line that we drew before, but it's good enough. I mean, this is still the general direction of the trend. And I think steady as she goes. It still looks like it's going higher. And with the chip makers going up as well, I think that's a really good correlation between the two. So as long as they're going higher or in bull phases, I'd be bullish on something that's linking to that, which is obviously what Render Token is doing. So look, this looks like one of the leaders because there's many that are in a range and still waiting to move higher. But this one still looks like it's got more gas in the tank to go higher. So I'm still a buyer.
Yeah, it does look like it's going to go higher, but I did get some at the lows, but I've cashed it all out. Like I bought some a long time ago for this because I liked it when it was nice and cheap. As to buying more, no, only when I see it go above, like if it breaks this trend, then it would just be a short-term swing trade. So if it follows this resistance up and it breaks its previous high from a couple of weeks ago, then it's pretty clear to me it's going to swing up a little bit more, and I'd just be taking it as a swing trade. Other than that, for a longer term buy, it's not, because I like Render. It's realizing some of its potential. It's already gone up 4x. So say it does a total of 40x from the bottom to the top when the rains come in, then it's already gone 4 of that x, which takes away a lot of your returns. So for me, it's just a wait, because there's other things that are massively on sale that haven't had much increase yet, and Render's had some of its increase. Now maybe it goes higher than 40x from where the bottom was to when the rains come in, and that's really the money maker. Sometimes this trading in the meantime is nice, because sometimes it can increase your position size for when it's cheap, but the major things happen, the major wealth is created when people patiently accumulate and dollar cost average during the really down times. And then they wait till everybody's talking about crypto and how it'll never stop going up, and then they're taking profits during that time. And that's the millionaire maker type of event that you're really waiting for. And so some of this is if you miss this and didn't make any money, it's no big deal. There's other deals out there. You're looking for things that have good substantive reasons, like a strong team and a strong narrative of why they might survive. And Render has that, and it's gone up a bunch. So I don't chase into this unless I can just take a small swing trade and it's clear to me it's going to go up further. Great. And then I roll those gains into something that's massively on sale. So good suggestion by one of our viewers. It's at a very interesting point, and it is counter trading the market. Most things are trading sideways or down, and yet Render looks like it wants to run higher here. Let's take a look at XHV.
Is that Haven? Because I just put the codes in.
Let me see. Thought Haven had a different. It is Haven Protocol. I thought Haven had a different ticker symbol, but you're right. It's Haven.
Okay, so if this is the correct one, which I think it is, let's just check that. No, hang on. No, that isn't, because that's, you see, a lot of these coins stopped around May 22. So when I see May, I think, oh, it's the right one, but it actually isn't. So what was the code again?
XHV.
XHV. So XHV. Yeah. So so I'm not sure which one that would be. Let's have a look at.
I've got it on CoinMarketCap.
Yeah. Let's see if we can get it on XHV. Let's see if we can get it here under crypto. Because I prefer to see it on this chart if we can, because CoinMarketCap, as good as it is, it's difficult to point stuff out on the chart. Okay, so Haven Crypto Protocol, Haven Protocol, what's going on here? It's a decent bounce from the low in terms of percentage, but not in terms of changing the direction of the chart. When a market is making a base, it has to consolidate, and we haven't seen that consolidation phase as yet. Now, the thing with crypto assets, especially altcoins, is that they can V low, and what we mean by that is they make a low and then rally as quickly as they've fallen, mainly because there is less influence from a group, and they can be influenced by a smaller number of people, which is makes them harder to predict. We did have a basing pattern around here, or potential basing pattern, I should say. So there was a good chance of a rally in January, as this had been, this had based out, the moving averages crossed over. Although I'm not one of these people that is a slave to the crossovers. I think it's contextually, you've got to look for when it's happening and what the overall chart looks like. But usually a crossover like this, where the short-term moving average goes through the longer one, that's a bullish signal. But if you look at where it happened here, which was right at the high. So that was too late to to be buying it, and we got another signal here to sell as it crossed over to the downside. So all that's telling me is that this has been in a range and hasn't formed anything technically as yet to tell me that it's time to step in. So that could be happening. Maybe it will catch up the rest of the market, but it's underperforming and it's broken its prior low, which it's come back to have a look at. But I'm not convinced at this stage that it's done enough to warrant a buy. So it's definitely a wait, and it's bordering on a sell because of the position that it's in. What would change that view is if it gets back over this support level, which is, well, resistance level, which is prior support. Needs to get back into this zone, or we need to see some form of reversal pattern, like an inverse head and shoulders, double bottom, even a spike. And a spike is when the market panics down and then rallies back up. So you see the news, whatever it's developing in the background, you get this purge of positions, and then people who see it as an amazing long-term opportunity will just dive in and start hoovering up the asset, and it rallies back up. And it's usually happening around a maximum bearishness and, you know, lots of emotion around the particular product, whatever it might be. But just because something's going down fast doesn't make it a buy. It has to stabilize before technically I can say it's a buy. You could use the 60-day moving average, which is this one, as a primary trigger. And what I mean by that is that'll be your first step to buying, and whilst it's below, just wait. We want to see some strength there, and we'll have to wait a little bit longer. But perhaps, you know, we could have a look at it in a month or so's time and see where it is.
Yeah, so Haven is a privacy protocol. In privacy protocols, that narrative did extremely well in 2017, 2018, before the regulators really got involved this past year, with them going after the developer of Tornado Cash and jailing him. Well, it's really put a squash on, well, investors are concerned about the privacy protocols and where can they go, and you see that reflected in the price. I mean, their price is just really, really low. So Haven at one point was trading at $25 and is now at 31 cents. And all their tokens are in circulation. So it's got about a $9 million market cap. You see, what is Haven Protocol? Haven Protocol is similar to an offshore bank where users can create private tokens that represent stable and volatile assets, including commodities and fiat currencies such as USD. The protocol is based on Monero, which focuses on secure, private, and traceable transactions. So do I hope this narrative does well? Yes, because you don't want all your money on a protocol where everyone can see every purchase you make. And the reason is like when the United States was founded, they put in the Bill of Rights that you could have privacy in what they called your papers, which means you can keep certain things private. There's a difference between your private self and your public self. And that just allows you privacy. And the reason that's important, and sometimes people will say, well, if you don't have anything to hide, then what are you concerned about? And it's like, well, there's this thing called none of your business, meaning like, it's not everyone's business what I do in my private life all the time. And it isn't, because they'll declare something politically incorrect. And if all of your life is public, even though whatever is politically incorrect might be wrong, and political correctness is almost always wrong. Since the history of time, almost everything that's become politically correct over time has been shown to be fake. Bad science, bad whatever, just wrong for things. And so then if you're politically incorrect, even if you're actually doing the right thing, like 70 years ago, it was politically incorrect to think black people were as smart as white people. Are black people as smart as white people? Yes, there's no difference because of the color of their skin organ. Yet if you said something like that, you were shunned. And so they try to make no difference between your private self and your public self. And I think it's important to have a difference. And privacy protocols allow you to spend money at places where it's no one else's business. Now, is that narrative done well? No, not yet. Now, might it? I sure hope so. And where it will is when the government takes control of as much as they can, and then they realize, oh my gosh, I don't want everyone to be able to see all of my transactions. there's got to be a privacy way of taking care of this stuff. And then some kind of privacy things will be endorsed. Why? Because the powerful want a distinction between their private selves and their public selves. Ask Joe Biden about that. Ask Hunter Biden about that. So politicians, corrupt ones and honest ones, will want a distinction between their public selves and their private selves. Why? Because we don't want everybody seeing everything we're doing, because sometimes even purposely, the private things that you're doing aren't even wrong, but they can be construed to be wrong. And when you have like the Soviet Union didn't want a difference between a private self and a public self. And so that's why privacy coins are a great thing, but why they haven't done well, especially as regulators are cracking down, particularly on privacy coins, they haven't thrived. And I hope they do at some point. All right, let's jump over because of time. Let's jump right over to Flow. Would I buy it at this price? No, I'm not. I need to see how that narrative's doing. And I like this price, and it's cheap. And even though I buy cheap, the risk on this is higher than some of the other things that I'm looking at that have potential gains. And when I'm evaluating the entire picture of what is the price versus the potential. Now, could this take off? Yes. Could absolutely do well if the privacy narrative was able to come back. The fact that they jailed Tornado Cash and would look and try to jail other people, I would have to see some turns. And there's a reason. You see the founders of this. Who are the founders of this protocol? The protocol was first worked on by two unidentified developers. Now, do you understand why privacy protocols, usually the founders are unidentified? Now, that creates a risky environment, especially risky environment when you don't know who they are. Why are they keeping themselves unidentified? Well, apparently it's pretty smart to do that, because you might just get arrested for something if you are identified, just as what happened with the developer of Tornado Cash. So that's where things are at, and that was a hot topic. Let's jump over and take a look at Flow.
Sure thing. So I'll keep it brief because of time. Basically, downward trend. There's nothing at this stage to indicate that there's a reversal. We are approaching a major low, or have been, and there's not enough margin between where we are now and that major low for me to be comfortable. See, all these highs are falling, so we need to break this pattern of higher lows, lower highs, I should say, before we can say that this trend has ended. Now, that doesn't mean that it definitely will go down. It just means the probabilities are that it will go down. If it could form a low here where it's trying to break this trend line and start to move up, then we would get a higher low from this low here and a potential base. So, if it can start to rally, the prospects of what it's creating technically would look really good. But at this point in time, for me, it's definitely a wait because of the overall downward trend. It needs to break that pattern before I could suggest buying it.
Yes, I love the price. For me, I have a different take on it because I buy at different points than Paul does. And for me, it's a buy. I like the Flow blockchain, NBA Top Shots, NFL All Day, the MMA, the UFC contract, right? So they have some of those UFC collectibles. And right now, that is all out of the narrative. Have those cards, those moments done well? No. When I first bought NBA Top Shots, it was in the last bear market when they launched. And I thought, well, I think this narrative has some probability that could do well. Kind of like basketball cards. And early basketball cards, when they first started making basketball cards, had you bought a ton of them, you would have made a ton of money. Baseball cards, when they first launched, had you bought a ton of them, you could have made a ton of money. Hockey cards, when they first launched. So there's a desire for these collectibles as more people move in to collect those. They haven't gotten mass adoption of those. But even then, 6 months after I bought, so when I first started, I was like, I think this idea of these video moments will do well. And it's all on the Flow blockchain. And so I bought some NBA Top Shots, and I saw this LeBron James, and I don't follow U.S. basketball closely, but everyone knows who LeBron James is, and he's one of the greatest athletes of all time, which is pretty undisputed. just his stats show that. And so there was a moment, I think it was even a rare moment, and it was sitting on the market for like $78. And I was like, well, shoot, it's $78. Let me pick that up. And I happened to get a common moment of him out of a pack. And later, just 6 months later, as money came into the market, guess what? The Flow blockchain absolutely took off. The NBA Top Shots took off. At the time, Flow's price was too high for me that I wasn't buying the Flow blockchain because the price, look at where it started when it was trading. It was, well, this is just showing it here, but it was still pretty expensive. So I didn't buy the Flow blockchain. And it did go up some. So you could say, oh, I totally missed out. It went from $8 to $36. So it 4x'd. Well, those cards themselves, at the time, I felt like the cards were the better moment, or the NBA Top Shot moments were the better investment. And they did about 170x. So I put about $1,100 into it, went to $185,000 in a matter of 6 months. So yeah, way better returns. Now Flow has gotten really, really cheap, right? So $36 at the high down to 80 cents. That's the type of stuff I like to see. That's like a 97% discount. Okay, so now Flow is really, really interesting to me. Yeah, so its overall market cap still puts it in blue chip category. So I'm not buying it just because the market cap's higher than what I'm looking for in this cycle. But if I were buying blue chips this cycle, I would absolutely be adding in to the Flow blockchain. That's why it gets a buy for me. Just my specific, what I'm looking for is the higher risk stuff this cycle. And so I'm not buying blue chips. But if I were buying blue chips, I would be buying some Flow. Perfect. Great suggestions. LUKSO was our last one. Then we'll jump into some viewer picks because I want to have some time for that.
Yeah, there was also XRP as well you want to look at. So,
yes.
LUKSO completely different. Nice upward trend. You can see it, the signature of the way it goes up. We've got these waves, these higher lows, higher highs. Of course, the all-time high is still far away, but it's structurally compared to the rest of the market, this is doing very well. Also makes me wonder how much it can outperform before potentially it gets pulled lower. But this is a nice triangular constriction here. So ordinarily, if the broader market was just a little bit more bullish, I'd be very, very excited about this. But I'm just a little cautious because the dollar's strengthening and some of the other reasons that I mentioned before, as to whether this will hold as a triangular breakout. But that's a nice pattern. So if we get through this $14.99, $15 area, then look for an extension of this trend. But overall, it's a buy. I like the higher lows. I would like to see it accelerate. Whether it can accelerate in this environment, I don't know. But it's looking really good. So it's one of the better charts that we're seeing this week. Where I would get concerned about it is if it got below $9.8. That's because there's good support and resistance there. There's good resistance on the way up, good support on the way down. So that's a key pivotal level for me. If it got below there for, say, a week or so, I think time-wise I'd be looking to bail out. But overall, structurally, looks really good.
Yes, much different from much of what we're seeing. That chart does look better in a lot of ways. Let me share some fundamentals on this. All right. For those that don't know, and I don't know how to say it, LUKSO. LUKSO, the blockchain for the new digital lifestyle, is created by former ETH developer Fabian Vogelsteller, author, this is a big deal, of ERC20 and ERC725. Developer of Web3.js and the Mist browser. LUKSO is a substantive team member driving this project. That is a big deal. LUKSO is a multiverse blockchain network where the worlds of fashion, gaming, design, and social media intersect. LUKSO, they have it spelled backwards here, focused on bringing blockchain to the masses through its smart contract-based blockchain industry involving standard processes. Interesting. I didn't realize this project had some good substance to it. So obviously I missed it at the point that I love. And this block, the overall market cap at this point would have been 50 million, which is in a spot that I like it. Now its market cap is entering blue chip category at 208 million. But this chart is looking better. Will it continue on this trend? Well, it's got this long, solid base. You're seeing, let's see, the market cap is 208 million. Its fully diluted market cap is 1.32. So it looks like 1/7 of the tokens are in supply. So there's going to be more tokens coming into circulation. I don't know what the vesting schedule of that looks like, but that's a concern. But a solid base forming here, like this is pretty solid and a solid, nice round turnaround. Interesting. For me, it's a wait. Paul and I buy at different points. I like to buy when it's cheaper, and it's outside my price range. I like the fundamentals behind this, though. Whoever suggested this, great suggestion. This one had not been on my radar and should have been. So thank you for that. LUKSO, yeah, the team behind it, like this person, this is a big deal that he developed both these standards. Means the guy knows what he's doing and is an innovator that gets adoption of what he does. That is a big deal in this space because a lot of teams are so new and inexperienced, and this is a person bringing some vast experience to the table that has got things done. Great suggestion. Let's jump over to XRP and let me look through, see what other ones we want to take a quick look at.
Okay, XRP still in a consolidation, in a range. I mean, I think broadly speaking, the outlook is bullish because it's one of the majors, and the majors are still structurally bullish. But it didn't have the big collapse during the bear market. It just went sideways, and it hasn't had the big rally either. So it's kind of balanced on both sides. So it's taken out its downward trend. It did that at this point. It's corrected down since then, but all it's done is come back into its range. So it's in a fairly neutral position. When I look at something like this, I ask myself the question, am I about to miss something? Am I about to miss a really good buying opportunity? Should I be buying it today? Now, at the moment, I can't see any reason why that would be the case. But it's because it's in this neutral point. But if it starts to edge up towards this 50 cents area, I would start to get a bit more excited about the potential for it to take out and properly break through this resistance area here, which is clearly very key. It was important on the way down. As we've seen on quite a few charts, there's a similar pattern where it hits this resistance and struggles to extend the bull market. But timing-wise, it seems to fit in that we're not quite ready for everything to be burning higher in a broad way. But that will come, I believe. So for the moment, it's a wait, but it would turn into a buy very quickly if it got towards this 55 cents area. Yeah.
Now, some of our community members know the depth of what's going on with XRP, and they often, by their fundamental research, they get me tempted to buy it. Now, its market cap is way higher than what really my principles dictate I buy, but their arguments are so persuasive sometimes. I'm tempted to buy it because I do think XRP is going to change the world in a number of ways, and not just with taking on the SEC. Now, had they just settled with the SEC, they probably could have negotiated like a $20 million fine, and they themselves would have been way better off, and everything would have been hunky-dory, and they would have had all kinds of political support, especially if they then used a whole bunch of money to give to political parties. And yet they decided to stand on principle. So I will forever love XRP because they stood on principle rather than political gain. And they fought the SEC, who's trying to deem them a security, even though they're probably going to win that suit. The last chairman of the FCC had a different feeling, and the current chairman used to have a different feeling too before he got into that seat appointed by the current White House, and then his opinions changed. And I think it's because the current administration is very much trying to hold back the river like we talked about. And so the current chairman of the SEC, contrary to what he was saying just a few years ago, has deemed that 90-something% of the crypto space is all securities. And even though he said just like 3 years prior that probably 75% of the crypto space is not a security and maybe only 25% is. So his views changed drastically once he was appointed by the current White House and in this position. And why they changed, I don't know. The facts of those projects didn't change. His opinion did. So somebody is directing putting a hold or trying to clamp down on all the crypto projects, probably so they can extract some value from them or what, for whatever reason. And XRP took that fight, and I hope they do exceptionally well. Now, their innovations are amazing, and what they've been working on. They've been working on this for a very, very long time. And XRP can solve the problems. Like, I hope that fiat currency is still with us for 50 years. I don't want to see the US dollar go away, but I'm seeing the kind of things that make me worry that it's going to go away. And with the current fiat system, and even without it, maybe XRP's technology allows remittances across the world for extremely cheap, extremely fast. They have the right connections, the right agreements to make this all happen. And that part is very, very bullish. Now, their market cap is 22 billion, so they're well into the blue chip category. Where could things go from here? Well, you will see market caps over $1 trillion in the future. Bitcoin has broken that threshold. ETH hasn't yet, but in 10 years and 20 years, there will be many projects in that threshold, and XRP will probably be one of them. Great suggestion. Let's take a look at, let's see, let me scroll to the top, see any other suggestions. We'll take maybe one more. Bill Gardner picked up another Mil Omi yesterday. I did buy some more Omi, and I did buy some more Illuvium myself. ILV. All right. That's what I'm seeing. I haven't followed. So Tommy asked me, what are my thoughts on the current disaster with Ledger? I think he's talking about where some people's assets are just going missing out of their Ledger wallets. I think that's what he's talking about. I haven't looked into it deeply. One of the big challenges I've seen with Ledger, when I was somewhat newer to space in end of 2018, this guy was in a panic because he had bought a Ledger through Amazon, but it wasn't from Ledger itself. And all of a sudden his funds got drained. He had 15,000. It was his life savings in there. And he thought he was being safe because he bought a Ledger and put it in it. Yeah. So I know, like, I bought a Ledger forever ago, and then their database got hacked, and I started getting scam emails, which was massively unfortunate. They allowed their database get hacked. So then these hackers know that pretty much you're interested in crypto if you were buying a Ledger. And so I don't know enough about the current situation to have a good opinion, like a detailed opinion on it. So thanks for the question. I would tell you if I had formed an opinion. I don't know enough about what's behind it to have one yet. Well, thank you, everyone. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for the picks, guys. See you next week.
All right. Well, interesting market. This is what bear markets feel like. And you get little bits of hope, and then like things turn around and go down. The US dollar has taken a run up. And what's nice about that is that momentum will turn around and flood into risk on assets again. And so I see it as just building up some momentum. Now, the bull market is coming. I just don't know. Is the bull market going to be early and happen in 3 or 4 or 5 months? It could play out that way. That would be nice. Or is it going to give us a lot more time to dollar cost average and really come in 2 years? I don't know the answer to that. I'm constantly checking the market to evaluate what might happen, and it's still just very unclear how that's going to play out. But what I know is bear markets turn into bull markets. And if it doesn't happen right away, it happens pretty soon, because the whole crypto space, like Paul said, the markets are very compressed timelines. So one of the things that I love about crypto is the volatility combined with the compressed timelines, because say real estate in a lot of places peaked out. Now, potentially the dollar value keeps going up if the dollar continues to devalue itself, but the true value has started falling on a lot of real estate. Why? Because booms are always followed by busts. That's just how it happens. And so when is a good time to really start accumulating real estate? Well, in the middle of the bust. But then from the bust until the next boom, it might be 7 to 12 years from the bottom to the top. But in crypto, usually from the bottom to the top, could be a year and a half, could be 2 years, could be 2.5 years, but a much shorter window. And that's what's so exciting to me. In addition to that, in real estate, at some point or other, you have to deal with renters. If you're going to acquire these expensive, difficult to transact assets, you also have to deal with renters, which, okay, if you have to and you have no better options, great. But that's why I like crypto, is because you also don't have to worry about renters. However, you do have other concerns to worry about, like, is your ledger truly going to be safe? Or can somebody hack your assets? So it's not that you don't have other assets to worry about or other problems to worry about. You do have other problems to worry about. They're just different than having to deal with renters and calls at 10:30 because their toilet won't flush and they're all mad at you. And then you go unclog it and you find out their kid flushed a Barbie doll down the toilet, and that's why you're there, and you're there till midnight figuring that out, and you're not happy and they're not happy. And at least you don't have to deal with those problems. But in the crypto space, there's custody issues, there's regulatory fights. We're feeling that hot and heavy the past number of months. And at some point it will clear up and the skies will turn blue again and prices will go off to the moon on some cryptos. I'm looking forward to that. Hope it happens in 6 months, but just know it might be 2.5 years from now. But probably within that time frame, it's going to happen. So if you're here now, you're in the right place. This is just how it goes. And a lot of people come into this space thinking, okay, I get that it's going to take me a while to get rich from this, but they think they're going to invest $100 and that's going to turn into 100 million and it's going to happen in 6 months. And they find out it doesn't work out that way. But all of you know that. So thank you so much for joining us. Remember, this rap I wrote is for you. And I especially like the words. I came to this chasing all of the pumps, chasing the hype and all the hype trains. But like in life, you're bad before you're good. I just buy when it's boring, like a rainmaker should. Now it's boring. Realize you're getting good at becoming an investor. And in crypto, we're early stage venture capital investors. And you're bad before you're good. It just takes a while to learn these principles. So plug into the Telegram if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter. And if you're interested, join the Patreon group. I know that it costs $20 a month. I get it. That's there on purpose because it acts as an amazing screening mechanism so that when you join it, you're surrounded by other people as committed to their future as you are. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you later.
To the space, chasing all of the gains, chasing the pumps and all of the hype trains. But like in life, you're bad before you're good. Was told to buy when it was pouring like a rainmaker should. I buy when it's down, don't chase the boats that I miss. Cause I always made the time in mind. I stick the one out cause I'm patient like that. And I'll wait for the right time. I sell when it's high, I buy when it's low. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm just a rainmaker running the show. Calculated investments I don't lead with my heart. The principles are simple, they're leaving a mark. Why when it's boring, just gotta be smart. I sell when it's hype, like all the channels they pump it. That's when I was selling the parabolic and dump it. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm a rainmaker, making my own start. I'm with the future, learning the past. Makes the time fly by, years going so fast. The game plan is mine, I'll own it now. When I reach the top, haters asking me how. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love. And I follow what I learn, not relying on luck. Time is never better, the time like the present. This next 5 years is a gift and it's feeling like heaven. I'm committed to learn, studying to know that nothing comes easy, but with knowledge the game show. Sticking out this road could soon become a bear market. Learning and growing, and when it's slow will be the target. They say it's come out, Bitcoin is dead. The massive decreases can get to your head. Sticking around, the time is better. Strong like that, I'll let the others be fretters. 2 years time, the ball will bring back the gains. That makes it worth the effort, cause here comes the rain. So let's go rainmakers, let's make it all happen. Let go with the hate, let the haters be crapping. I'm here for 5 years, let's do this together. The time is right, the time could be better. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm a rainmaker, making my own start. I'm with the future, learning the past. Makes the time fly by, years going so fast. The game plan is mine, I'll own it now. When I reach the top, haters asking me how. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love. And I'll follow what I learn, not relying on luck. Haters be hating, the time to slow down. Addressing what they say when I'm wearing my crown. They're chasing green candles like someone who was new. I got a vision that was bigger, helping me to push through. I'm still human and sometimes it is rough. And that's what makes me special, simply I stay tough. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love. And I follow what I learn, not relying on luck.